Greetings, friends. Part of the challenge in resisting the globalists in their campaign to reset the world as a global nanny state where we're forced vaccinated, we can be told to wear masks at any time, where our every movement and purchase will be tracked. Part of the challenge in confronting them is that we are not as united as we could be, even in the West, even amongst Euro Canadians or people from a European background. It's not a solid Christian bloc. Christianity has largely subsided. You've got like competing New Age views and a big mix of just secular or semi-spiritual sort of framework. These are the sorts of views that come together, but nothing really unifying it in any coherent way, other than that we like freedom. But then what is freedom? Do you want unlimited freedom? But certainly we don't like this lockdown. We like things to be as they were before. Generally conservative values, but not only conservative people, that's the thing. But there is something tying us together. There is a certain character, a certain mindset. I mean, there's variation. There is something there, but one of the challenges is to have more of a united culture, quality over quantity. But I'm not ruling out that you need quantity too, if you want to win politically. Oh, we can't win politically maybe right now, but in the future you are going to need quality and you're going to need quantity. And in terms of quantity, we don't have the numbers quite yet. In fact, we're vastly outnumbered. However, numbers have improved because over the summertime, our protests in Toronto were like in the hundreds of people, like a few hundred people, generally very small. Then around the end of September, they shifted the location from Queen's Park, which is where the Ontario provincial government meets. They shifted it to Yonge-Dundas Square, which is a much more commercial location, across from the Eaton Centre, which is the largest mall. With that move, we saw the protests gain a lot more exposure, and for whatever reason, way more people started coming out. And we got in the thousands now. So it multiplied by twofold, threefold, maybe fourfold. We had some marches, like certainly more than 4,000 people. Maybe one there was arguably between 6,000, some people say 8,000 people. This was, within the last 2 months. Now again, it's gone back down again, but it's hovering around 2,000 people or maybe more. It remains to be seen what happens as the weather gets colder. There are two chief groups that I'm aware of that are responsible for organizing these anti-lockdown protests in Canada, or at least in Toronto. And these are The Line, and the other one is known as Hugs Over Masks. The Line, they have a good name because it's about don't cross the line. Like, this is where I draw the line, and their logo is a line. So it's like, you've crossed the line, now we're drawing the line. So it's a good idea that you can keep repeating. And then Hugs Over Masks, I think that was a good idea maybe at the time, but is it as a long-term strategy, is that name wise? Probably not, because it focuses everyone's attention on the masks, and they keep saying, oh, we're about more than that. We're about the whole crackdown on our freedoms. Yeah, but then you shouldn't have chosen that name. But anyways, they're good people for the most part. I will still say that there's generally not too much organization to these protests. It's just people coming up, and it's good. It's good to have that organic grassroots people coming together. But at some point, these organizations are just protest organizations. It's not like they're not religions. They're not like a way of life that you're living out. And because this is a spiritual battle, you're going to need that juice in order to win the war. So that's the setting. We are heavily outnumbered. I mean, white people are divided amongst themselves, so there's never going to be that sort of real racial unity there. There's going to be some, but white people are our own biggest enemy. And then all these other we're in a multicultural society, so we're splintered, and that weakened the overall culture, but it also plays different cultures up against one another by these same globalists who are using us as pawns. And that's why they import, the third world immigrants over here. They're using them as pawns, lower the wages, destabilize the political situation. So this is a situation we find ourselves in: ongoing lockdown and exhaustion from the fear propaganda and more cynicism. You will see probably more people coming over to us eventually, but again, it's a culture war, it's a spiritual war, it's a propaganda war, and we're up against like all the institutions here. So in this situation with all these challenges, what do? You got to look for allies wherever you can find them. And this past Saturday at Yonge-Dundas Square, before we started our march, they're passed by Falun Dafa, which is also known as Falun Gong. This is you might call it a cult, but it's like a semi-religious movement or organization based in China. They have around 70 to 100 million followers in China and untold numbers of people around the world, mostly Chinese people, although it does attract some Western people. If you look online for the basics about this organization, as I did, I mean, I'd heard of them before. I knew they were persecuted in China, but their core values are truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. So, that's kind of vague, and they practice meditation and they do some Tai Chi sort of exercises. They often do these in groups, and they may live by some Buddhist moral principles. So they have some of the trappings of a religion, more than we do. And what you won't read online is that they're organizing against, well, you will, but if you go, not in their official, stuff, but they are organizing against the CCP, against the Chinese Communist Party, and spreading information and march. They were marching in the street by Yonge-Dundas Square. Our group saw them. We were supportive of them. We thought it was great. They had banners against the Chinese Communist Party. Now, I don't believe this is a struggle from, if communism is simply the enemy. That's just a false dichotomy. It's much more nuanced than that. But on the face of it, this is a message I can get behind. I'm just saying, maybe they are a funny cult with questionable New Agey views, but we got to work with who we got to work with here. And if they're an enemy of an ally of our enemy, because our enemy is the globalists, our own governments, the media. Those are our enemies, especially the media, the universities to an extent, not as an institution, but the people in them. And then who's an ally of them? Well, the CCP. And we know this because our media, our governments cover for the CCP. They won't publish anything too questionable about them. And the Trudeau family loves communist China. Sacha Trudeau has traveled extensively in Asia and has questionable goings on there. And there's also the financial stake that a lot of Chinese, not necessarily the Communist Party, but overseas Chinese, they have a stake in Canada, like they do in Australia and other places, real estate, this kind of thing. So anyways, they were carrying a banner that one of the banners said the pandemic was caused by the CCP. They were wearing uniforms. There were hundreds of them. There were like up to 800 of them, maybe 1,000, with a marching band, cymbals, drums, saxophones, other instruments. Most of them were not wearing masks. I like their organization. It's men and women, young and old, it seemed. And they're marching by, with some, uniformity, regularity, like they've been drilled, kind of, like not militaristic, but they've practiced. And it's something beyond the casual for them. And their colors are white, blue, and yellow. So bright colors. They're doing some Asian things, but, gestures. But generally it had sort of a, Western model that they're using in this parade. And marched by us, and we were thinking like, well, why don't we ally with these people? I mean, I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying like, oh, if you're gonna put me on the one to reach out to these people. I don't speak Cantonese or Mandarin or whatever, but I know this is a regrettable situation. This is the desperate circumstances that we find ourselves in a multicultural society. But you got to find allies here, and if they are an enemy of kind of not an enemy of our enemy, but an enemy of an ally of our enemy, which is the globalists, which arguably the CCP are kind of globalists too, but they're played by them. because we need all the help we can get. And I mean, in terms of China, like in Canada, they're one of the most influential immigrant blocs. They're going to be much more influential than Latinos or South. I don't know. South Asians would be pretty influential too. Sikhs, but I mean, especially the Asian community. I've spoken of them pessimistically being one of the largest blocs against what we're trying to do because they wear masks. They like to follow orders. But whenever evil asserts itself in the world, I'm not saying any particular people is evil, but when that sort of horrible CCP and the culture that comes from, the evil that represents, breaks the spirit of a people, there's always going to be a flip side to whenever you're trying to crack down on someone or suppress someone. There's always going to be a weak point where you can flip the table, and so what am I saying is like that oppression, it creates a landscape in China where there's a spiritual void because they have their views, but it's still generally like a spiritually lacking landscape. That's why Christianity can spread like wildfire in China. Not that I know crazy things have happened in like where the Boxer Rebellion and stuff like charismatics get a little out of hand, but that should show you that it's ripe for that kind of thing, and that's something we can exploit. It's not just somewhat questionable New Age movements like Falun Dafa. It's also Christians in China. There are millions and millions of Christians in China. So this is something we want to think about. Maybe working with them, allying with them, marching with them. And if we don't even ally with Falun Dafa, because that sounds kind of wacky, but I'm just throwing it out there. If we don't, then at least consider that they have more of an organization. They're doing something. I'm not saying we need to drill and have a marching band, but because if we did, we would be public enemy number one, because Asians can do it. If white people do it, we'd be public enemy number one, because you know why. Like if they saw us marching in the street and we're against the government, that's all they need to know. We'd be public enemy number one. However, the example, the lesson there is that if we don't ally with these people, at least look to their example. What are they doing? They're more unified. They're more unified culturally. There's lessons there for us. They're getting together in an organization beyond the casual. They're putting out a unified front against something which is evil in the world. So I commend them for that. And the other group would be Hong Kong freedom protesters. The people who are protesting in Hong Kong against the draconian measures of the CCP in taking away more of their freedoms, which preceded all this lockdown madness. Just months before all this stuff started this year was the Hong Kong protests. So these are groups in China we can work with. I hope we could one day work with even some of these people. We need all the help we can get. Hasta luego, amigos.